Hey everyone, Chris Mack presents today with Action Comics Issue 1. This is a comic that I've been wanting to go over for a while, but I had to hunt down the digital copy because I have a reprint of it, but I'm very reluctant to take it out since obviously owning an original Action Comics #1 is almost impossible for a majority of us collectors. So the one that I have, I try to keep in great shape. It was a reprint from 1992, around the death of Superman time when they did that as a promo, I guess. Anyway, got the digital, so that's what we're going to go over today. As you can see, print date was June 1938. And from what I understand, Action Comics #1 is the beginning of the superhero era because up to this, comics were either like cartoons, like I think, if I'm wrong, feel free to make fun of me down in the comments, but it was like Casper, Archie, stuff like that. And then you would have, oh God, I can't remember what DC was called at this time, but you would have Detective Noir or military, like I think the Screaming Commandos, but Superman and then Batman kind of changed the game for DC. So here, in its original, at least to a point, I'm hoping that this isn't a lot of recolors in this digital version, but Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster doing all of the work together. Now, what I like about this is before any of the crises. So this is the original, what do you call it, backstory of Superman, where it says, as a distant planet was destroyed by old age, the scientist placed his infant son within a hastily devised spaceship, launching it towards Earth. And when the vehicle landed on Earth, a passing motorist, discovering the sleeping babe within, turned this child over to an orphanage. Attendants, unaware of the child's physical structure, was millions of years advanced of their own. They were astounded at the feats of strength. So right here, I'm not sure. Feel free to inform me, but I don't know when like the name Planet Krypton was introduced, or when the Kents were brought into the picture. And I wasn't sure if it was pre or post Flashpoint when they started talking about Krypton being a dying planet instead of just old age. But here you can kind of see what they originally intended. And when I went over the Action Comics #1 McFarlane figure, we talked about how Superman was originally supposed to have like these Sparta version laces or whatnot. We'll go over that in a second, but I wanted to kind of put that in everyone's mind. If you haven't seen the video, I'll make sure to leave the link somewhere on this review so you can click it at your convenience. But check out how here Superman's power set is limited. It says when maturity was reached, he discovered he could easily leap an eighth of a mile, hurdle a 20-story building, raise tremendous weights, run faster than an express train, and that nothing less than a bursting shell could penetrate his skin. And then it goes on here to say, and this is what I kind of miss about older books when they would actually teach, because comics back in the day were focused primarily on kids. And I kind of wish that they would still do this to a degree now, where it says a scientific explanation of Clark Kent's amazing strength. And it shows here how the lowly ant can support weights hundreds of times its own its own weight. And then the grasshopper leaps what to man would be the space of several city blocks. It just kind of gives you something to think about and mull over. Kind of like, here's a fun fact for all you Eurotrip fans out there. But here, Superman originally could not fly. He leaped. That's why the old Max Fleischer cartoons, he'd say, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Because at this time, Superman couldn't fly. I think it was actually, if I remember correctly in my research and talking to Supertron, it was the Fleischer cartoon, and I think the radio series too, that kind of enabled Superman to fly. And so just kind of seeing how he would just leap here is kind of funny, but at the same time, for the time. And now going back to what I was talking about with the Sparta boots, if you notice, look at all these panels, how Superman is very heavily inked. Because if I remember correctly, these comics were originally in black and white in the newspaper strips. And so when it came to DC and they colored it, they had to go over their very heavy lines. And because they didn't want Superman to have those, Sparta boots, it looks like he has blue booties in this issue. And that's why the figure that came out through McFarlane focused on that, because originally those were supposed to be laced up. And you can kind of see it if you look close enough And what I liked about how they introduced Superman here is the stories are relatively simplistic. The first story is kind of like Detective Comics, where Batman is solving a murder mystery. This first one is Superman only having 15 minutes to save someone from death row and having to get to the mayor's um, home and kind of having to fight his manservant, I guess you would call it back in the day, and saving her. The next story is we kind of get more with Clark Kent, and again, this is brought up post crisis, and I think what was see how the crises start to come together. The one that Jeff Johns did, Infinite Crisis, sure, whatever. But we kind of see the Earth 2 Superman, how he worked at the Daily Star, him and Lois both. Yeah, and then we don't even get Perry White. It just says editor on the door. So just some really cool things on how Superman originally was introduced, showing him how Clark Kent always act to meet. What's that word? Meek. I haven't had enough coffee today, guys. And Clark here says, "What do you say to a date tonight, Lois? I suppose I'll give you a break for a change." And so it says that night they go out dancing, and then we get some hoodlums saying, "Oh, I'm going to cut in on her, and I'm going to get that dame," and all these 50s, 30s, and 40s jargon from that time. But he basically just cuts in on him. And Lois is like, "Clark, are you going to stand for this? Be reasonable, Lois. Dance with the fellow, and then we'll leave right away." And this is why, to me, Christopher Reeves will always be Clark Kent and Superman. If you remember the Donner cut of Superman 2, when Lois finds out who Superman is, she, he keeps saying, "Oh, Lois, you're having your hallucinations again," and he has that very meek attitude, and she pulls the trigger on the gun in her purse, and he straightens up real quick. And Donner, very subtly enters the Superman music, and she's like, "Gotcha." And he removes his glasses, and you can see how he goes from a slouch position to standing up straight. He goes, "If you were wrong, Clark Kent would have been dead." And even though it was Blake's, as Lois says in the movie, it just shows here how Clark tries to imitate us, which kind of reminds me of that talk that Bill had in Kill Bill 2, where he was talking about how Spider-Man has to put on a mask, Batman has to put on a mask to become a hero. But Clark, Superman is Superman. He puts on a disguise to fit in with us. And essentially boils down to, what does that say about the human race? So just some very cool dynamics to think about. But anyway, so Clark backs off, and then she slaps the dude. And I like how he whispers, "Good for you, Lois." But then he's like, "Don't," to again act meek. And so it just goes into a chase for the dame, because these guys kidnap Lois. And then right in the middle of the panel, we get that iconic cover of smashing this car and him saving Lois Lane and basically giving Clark Kent a run for his money for her affection. So great story overall. I love that if you really look at the way this Superman suit looks, yes, it's kind of changed, but overall, when we look at Superman, we always think of the blue suit, the red trunks, the red cape with the emblem on the back. And it's just stood the test of time, and why him and Batman are such iconic characters. So if y'all have never read Action Comics #1, I highly recommend it. If you guys have the ducats, then I'd say get yourself an original copy if you can. But yeah, that one goes for like millions of dollars. So if you can get a reprint, dive into it. If not, here on the Google Play Store, it's only, I think, $1 or $2. And if you at least want to be able to say you've read this story, go this route, or however you can, just support your local comic shop and grab this, or just grab some Superman comic books in general. Now, if you guys have enjoyed this review, I really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel. The club channel, well, I'm still used to it being the club. It helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little super bell next to subscribe, that way, as we continue to upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with y'all and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below, or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, I hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.